I was 17 when I first saw him. Not saw him, like the way I saw chauffeurs or business partners trailing after my father. Not even the way I saw my so-called friends, with their fake laughs and shallow compliments. No, I mean the kind of seeing that brands itself into your memory and doesn't let you go. Lucian Vale. The name came later. That day, all I knew was that something inside me shifted when my eyes landed on him. I had been roaming the halls of the Beaumont estate the way I always did, like I owned them, because I did. Born heir to one of the most powerful families in London, I'd grown up wrapped in silk sheets and polished expectations. Our marble floors gleamed, our chandeliers dripped with crystals, and every portrait staring down from the walls reminded me of the dynasty I was destined to inherit. Still, for all the power my name carried, I was bored. I'd seen it all. Until that afternoon. The door to my father's study was cracked open, just enough to tempt me. Normally, I ignored that room. Too many men with stiff collars and empty smiles. But something made me pause. And then I saw him. At first glance, he looked too young to belong there. Everyone else in that room was decades older, weighed down by years of money and arrogance. But he stood among them like he belonged, unshaken, untouched by their presence. Dark hair framed a face, so striking it almost seemed unfair. His jawline was sharp, his mouth firm, his skin sun-warmed and smooth. And his eyes. Those eyes were stormy grey, steady and unflinching, as if he'd already seen the world bare itself to him, and had found it unimpressive. He shouldn't have fit in with those men. Too young. Too fresh. But he did. Not because of age, but because of the way he carried himself. Straight-backed, shoulders squared, voice calm and commanding. I'd watched countless men crumble beneath my father's gaze. Richard Beaumont wasn't just feared in business. He was a storm in a tailored suit, a man who devoured the weak for breakfast. But this stranger didn't falter. He didn't stutter. He didn't blink. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, my breath caught in my throat. Confidence. That was it. Confidence that didn't have to be announced, didn't need to scream. It just was. He stood there like he was carved out of something unbreakable. And God, he was beautiful. Handsome in a way that made my stomach twist, made heat crawl under my skin. I couldn't look away, no matter how hard I tried. Something about him branded me, seared into my chest and refused to leave. I didn't know his name yet, didn't know his story. But I knew with a clarity I'd never felt before, that I wanted him. That was the moment I fell for Lucian Vale. And from that day forward, nothing else in my world would compare. He became a fixture in our house after that. At first, only in my father's study, late meetings that ran into the evening, hushed conversations about deals I couldn't care less about. But soon, Lucian began to stay for dinner. I hated how easily he fit in. My father, the man who shredded rivals with a single word, laughed with him. Actually laughed. I'd sit at the table, silent, picking at my food while they talked business, as if I weren't even there. Lucian had a way of speaking that drew people in. Confident, but never arrogant. Sharp, but never cruel. He was clever, innovative, already making a name for himself. Protégé, they called him in the financial papers. 23, and already negotiating with men twice his age. My father loved him for it. I hated him for it. Not because he was brilliant. No, I admired that. I hated him because he never looked at me. I was used to being looked at. My whole life, people had seen me first, spoken to me first, bent themselves into whatever shape they thought would earn my approval. But Lucian, to him, I might as well have been invisible. If his eyes landed on me, it was only in passing. A flicker. A polite smile. The kind you give a child before turning back to real conversation. Child. That's what I was to him. I could feel it in every glance he didn't give me. Every word he didn't say. He didn't mean to ignore me. He just didn't think I was worth noticing. And I couldn't stand it. The first time he came to dinner, I wore my sharpest suit. Navy silk, tailored to perfection, cufflinks gleaming. I knew I looked good. I always did. But Lucian barely glanced my way, murmured, "Evening," and returned to discussing markets with my father. The second time, I tried speaking up. Asked him questions. About his work, his life. He answered politely, briefly, then steered the conversation back to my father, as though I were a distraction. The third time, I gave up pretending. I just watched him. The curve of his jaw when he smiled. The way his eyes lit up when he spoke about strategy. The long fingers wrapped around his glass of wine. I memorized everything. And the more I watched, the worse it got. Because Lucian wasn't just handsome. He was kind in ways my father never was. When one of the servants dropped a dish, my father barked. Lucian helped pick it up. When a junior partner stuttered through a presentation, my father rolled his eyes. Lucian encouraged him. Little things. Quiet things. Things no one else seemed to notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything. And with every passing dinner, every stolen glance across the table, every laugh shared with my father while I sat silent and burning, my crush twisted into something heavier. Something dangerous. Because I wasn't just fascinated anymore. I was jealous. Of my father, for having his attention. Of the men in that study, for earning his respect. Of anyone who got what I wanted most. Lucian Vale. Not just to look at me, but to see me. By the time I turned 18, my world had narrowed into one obsession. Him. My obsession didn't quiver. It grew. Every day, every hour, every fleeting second that Lucian Vale breathed in the same air as me. It only deepened. The hunger to be seen. The ache to be wanted. The silent prayer that one day those storm-grey eyes would finally linger on me and not look past me like smoke. I tried everything. Sharp suits, late-night study sessions, feigned maturity, reckless laughter, even calculated rebellion. I threw every weapon I had at him. Sometimes he'd glance at me, just briefly, and in that heartbeat I lived. The world could collapse, the earth could burn, and I would still cling to the memory of the way his gaze felt when it fell on me. But it never lasted. Lucian always returned to formality. Always pulled back into that untouchable shell of his. He gave me politeness, civility, and nothing else. Not warmth. Not softness. Not the affection I burned for. And still, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. My obsession was the only thing that made my world feel alive. It was a week after my 18th birthday when the call came. The one that ripped the floor from under me. My parents were dead. I remember the night clearly. The house had been silent, too silent. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howled through the corridors of Beaumont Estate. But inside, it felt like a void. My phone rang once, twice, before I finally picked up. A voice I didn't know spoke words I couldn't comprehend. Mr. Beaumont. I'm sorry. There's been an accident. Your parents. The rest blurred. Car crash. A highway slick with rain. Instant. Gone. For a moment, I thought it was a cruel prank. My father was indestructible. My mother was untouchable. They weren't people who died. They were forces of nature. They were fixtures in the world. Terrible, brilliant, terrifying fixtures. But when I saw Lucian walking into the room, pale and solemn, I knew. It was true. And I hated myself for what I felt. Because beneath the grief, beneath the horror, a single thought slithered through me like poison. Now I have him. The funeral was a blur of black suits and whispered condolences. I moved like a ghost, numb, hollowed out. But I wasn't watching the caskets lowering into the ground. I wasn't listening to the priest. I was watching Lucian. The way he stood, tall and unshaken, a fortress in human form. People leaned on him. Board members, distant relatives, household staff. They all turned to Lucian Vale. He became the pillar everyone clung to while I drowned silently in my own storm. That day, my father was buried. And that day, Lucian stepped fully into his place. The will was read a week later. I sat stiffly in a leather chair, lawyers buzzing around with clipped voices and rustling papers. My father's legacy laid out in cold ink. Shares, properties, trusts. A kingdom of wealth and power. And then came the line that changed everything. Richard Beaumont names Lucian Vale as guardian and trustee of Arc Beaumont's estate until the age of 21. Guardian. The word rang in my skull like a bell. Lucian didn't flinch. He nodded once, tight, businesslike. Duty etched into every angle of his jaw. But me? I could barely breathe. It was fate. It had to be. My father's iron will had unknowingly given me exactly what I wanted most. Lucian Vale wasn't just in my orbit anymore. He was my world. My keeper. My shadow. And he hated it. I moved into his townhouse in Belgravia. A fortress of glass and steel, cold and immaculate, just like him. Lucian lived with precision. Every surface gleamed. Every object had its place. His life was a machine, efficient, exact, unyielding. And then there was me. I brought chaos. Not the kind that left rooms messy or rules broken. No, my chaos was quieter. I brought temptation. Long stares across the breakfast table. Brushing past him in the hallway, lingering too close. Testing boundaries with questions he never wanted to answer. At night, I listened for his footsteps in the corridor, the creak of his study door, the low timbre of his voice on late calls. Sometimes I pressed my ear to the wall, just to hear him breathing. Pathetic. I knew it. But obsession doesn't care about dignity. Lucian gave me everything my father would have: money, education, safety. But he starved me of the one thing I craved: affection. He never touched me unless he had to. A hand on my shoulder in passing. A steady grip when guiding me through a crowd. Each touch was fire, lightning, burning under my skin. But always clinical, never tender. He never spoke to me beyond what was necessary. Eat. Study. Be ready at 7. Cold. Distant. And yet, I lived for scraps. The rare times his eyes softened when he thought I wasn't looking. The brief flicker of concern if I stayed out too late. The way his jaw tightened when someone else's attention lingered on me. Signs. Small, dangerous signs. I clung to them like proof. Proof that somewhere, buried deep under all that iron duty, Lucian Vale wanted me too. But nights were the worst. Because at night, there was no pretense. No noise to drown out the silence. At night, I lay awake in the room across from his, staring at the ceiling, suffocating on everything unsaid. The grief of losing my parents gnawed at me. But even that grief twisted back to him. When nightmares woke me, I wanted Lucian. When pain hollowed me out, I wanted Lucian. And when the loneliness threatened to crush me, I wanted Lucian. Always him. Only him. One evening, weeks after moving in, I stood in the doorway of his study. He didn't look up from his papers. "Lucian," I said softly. A pause. His pen stilled. "Yes. I don't know how to do this." My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. "I don't know how to live without them." He finally looked up, grey eyes steady, unreadable. "You'll learn," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're stronger than you think." It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted arms pulling me in, a voice telling me I wasn't alone. I wanted comfort. But Lucian Vale didn't give comfort. He gave resolve. And maybe that was why I wanted him all the more. Because he was the only person who never crumbled. Not even in the face of my obsession. That night, lying awake in the dark, I made a silent vow. I would break through his walls. I would make him see me, not as a boy, not as a duty, but as the only person who truly belonged to him. Even if it consumed me. Especially if it consumed me. Because I wasn't just Richard Beaumont's son anymore. I was Ark. And Lucian Vale was mine. Even if he didn't know it yet. Living with Lucian Vale was torture. Not the kind with chains and fire. No, his torture was quieter. Crueler. It was in the way he moved past me without faltering. In the way his voice stayed level no matter how close I stood. In the way he made me feel like I was both invisible and burning at the same time. And yet, I lived for it. For the brush of his sleeve against mine at breakfast. For the sound of his voice echoing down the halls late at night. For the rare moments when his eyes, those storm-grey eyes, slipped and softened, just for a breath, before hardening again. I told myself those cracks meant something. I told myself Lucian Vale felt it too. It started with the small things. The flirtations no one else would notice. The games I played in silence. At dinner, I'd stretch out just enough for my foot to graze his under the table. He never reacted, never pulled away. But he never shifted either. He just kept eating, eyes on his glass of wine. And that stillness, it drove me mad. Because in that stillness I saw restraint, not ignorance. When I laughed louder than necessary, just to see if he'd look. When I teased sharper, daring him to snap. He never did. He only arched a brow, the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying amusement. And God, I lived for that twitch. Sometimes I leaned too close when I handed him documents from the estate. Close enough to feel the heat rolling off his skin. Close enough to catch the scent of cedar and smoke that clung to him. His jaw would tighten, his shoulders stiff, but his eyes never wavered. He thought he was hiding it. He wasn't. At least, that's what I told myself. And then there were the crumbs. The tiny mercies Lucian gave me, so fleeting they could have been accidents. Like the night I came home drunk from a party, stumbling up the stairs. He didn't scold me, didn't lecture. He just guided me with a steady hand on my arm, silent, but firm. His touch burned through me the whole night. Or the morning I fell sick with fever. I woke to a glass of water and medicine on my nightstand. Lucian never admitted he left it there, but I knew. Or the way he stood too close at a gala when investors' daughters crowded around me. His hand pressed lightly at the small of my back, guiding me away. Possessive. Protective. My heart soared at the thought. He'd never say it, but in my mind, those gestures screamed what his mouth refused to. He wanted me to. That belief became my oxygen. I read into everything. The way his gaze lingered a heartbeat too long. The way his voice dipped when he told me to behave. The way his hand brushed mine when he passed me a folder. They were signs. Proof. And with every sign, my courage grew. By the time my 20th birthday approached, I couldn't hold it in anymore. My obsession was eating me alive. I didn't want scraps, didn't want crumbs. I wanted Lucian Vale, all of him. His heart, his soul, his body. I had to confess. Even if it destroyed me. The night I chose was storming. Of course it was. Fate seemed to enjoy dramatics in my life. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rolled above London, and my heart pounded harder than the storm itself. I found him in his study, as always. The glow of his desk lamp lit his face, casting sharp shadows along his jaw. He didn't look up when I entered, only muttered, "You should be asleep." But I couldn't sleep. Not with this choking me. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice raw, almost breaking. Lucian finally raised his eyes. Storm grey, steady, unreadable. "What is it?" I stepped forward. My hands shook, but I didn't hide it. My chest heaved as I let the words pour out, words I'd buried for 3 long years. "I love you." Silence. Only the storm outside answered. I pressed on, desperate. "I've loved you since I was 17. From the moment I saw you, Lucian, I knew. You were it. You've always been it. Every day I've lived here, every night I've breathed the same air as you. It's been killing me not to say it. Please, don't look at me as a boy anymore. Don't see me as your duty. See me as yours." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something fierce, something raw. My breath caught. And then he killed it. His voice dropped, cold and final. "You don't know what you want, Arkansas." The words sliced through me. "You're young. Confused. You think you love me because I'm here, because your father trusted me, because you're clinging to the past. But this," his jaw tightened, his gaze hardening to steel, "this is nothing but obsession. And I won't betray your father's trust by indulging it." Betray. That's what he called me. That's what he called this. The storm roared outside, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. My chest cracked open, my lungs shredded, my heart splintered into shards too sharp to hold. I wanted to scream, to beg, to make him see, but his words had already burned me to ash. I fled. Out of his study, out of that house, out into the rain. I didn't care that I was drenched, that the cold cut through me like knives. The storm matched me. Broken. Wild. Lost. That night, I made my decision. I was leaving London. If Lucian Vale wouldn't have me, if he would rather shackle himself to my father's ghost than look at me, then I would disappear. I'd go to New York, bury myself in school, build a life that didn't orbit around him. Or at least I'd try. But obsession doesn't die with distance. In New York, I tried. I let people approach me. Dinners, coffees, handshakes, smiles. Some even called it dating. But none of it mattered. Because every time someone touched me, I remembered Lucian's hand guiding me home. Every time someone laughed, I remembered the rare twitch of his mouth when he almost smiled. Every time someone looked into my eyes, I saw only storm grey. No one compared. No one ever could. Because Lucian Vale wasn't just the man who broke my heart. He was the man who owned it. And even as I walked streets oceans away, even as I tried to forget, one truth haunted me with every breath I took. I would never stop loving him. My obsession didn't end with distance. It didn't fade when I stepped onto American soil, when the city lights of New York swallowed me whole. If anything, it grew. Every beat of freedom poured fuel onto it. Every quiet moment reminded me of him. I told myself I had left Lucian Vale behind, that I was building my life, carving something out of the shadows of London and the ghost of my father's will. But lies taste bitter when you know the truth. And the truth was simple. I had never left him. I couldn't. Even here, 3,000 miles away, Lucian bled into everything. The apartment I lived in, spacious, glass walls opening to the skyline, marble counters I never used, wasn't mine. It was his. Paid for by the trust he managed. Every month, tuition fees disappeared into Columbia's system without my hand touching a single form. His doing. His signature. Lucian Vale's invisible presence stalked me like a ghost. And I hated him for it. So I did the only thing I could. I refused to acknowledge him. Letters came sometimes. Envelopes heavy with his neat, sharp handwriting. They stayed unopened, tucked into a drawer I never dared open again. When his name appeared in my inbox, I deleted it before my eyes could betray me. I built my silence into a fortress and told myself it was strength. But God help me, I lived for the scraps. If tuition was paid, if the rent cleared, if my phone plan renewed automatically, I knew he'd thought of me. He hadn't forgotten. He couldn't. Pathetic, isn't it? To measure your worth in the shadow of a man's dutiful obligations. But when the heart is starved, it will take crumbs and call it a feast. On the surface, I built a life. Or something that looked like one. I attended lectures, sat in crowded halls where professors droned on about economics and markets, pretending I cared. I joined classmates for coffee, even laughed at their jokes, though none of them ever reached me. I went to the gym, bought expensive clothes, walked through the city with my head high, as if I were someone untouchable. But every night, when the world dimmed, when the city's hum quieted, and I was left with myself, I broke. My bed was too big, the sheets too cold. I would close my eyes, and there he was, his hand on a glass of wine, his voice steady in my father's study, the storm-grey eyes that never looked at me long enough to drown me, though I begged in silence for it. Lucian Vale. My curse. My addiction. My reason. And no matter how hard I pretended, I never truly left him. The invitation came on a Tuesday. I had been sitting at my desk, staring at an assignment I couldn't care less about, when the knock at the door pulled me out of the fog. The doorman handed me an envelope, heavy cardstock, embossed seal. The kind of paper you knew carried bad news before you even opened it. I didn't recognize the handwriting. Not Lucian's. That made me hesitate. For one insane second, I hoped, it was him. That maybe, after 2 years of silence, he had reached for me in some other way. But when I broke the seal, what spilled out wasn't comfort. It was fire. A wedding invitation. Lucian Vale. Genevieve Aldridge. I stared at the names until they blurred. My breath caught in my throat, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I'd forgotten how to breathe. Lucian. Married. The words rattled in my skull, each one a bullet. But it wasn't just that. It was her. Genevieve. My father's perfect match for Lucian. The woman he once spoke of at dinner, with that calculating gleam in his eyes. The one he had wanted Lucian to marry, to bind their families together. I remembered it. I remembered hating the way my father looked at Lucian, as though he were some prized possession to barter. I remembered the way Lucian had lowered his gaze politely, saying nothing, never agreeing, never refusing. And now this. My father was gone, but Lucian was still obeying him. Still living under his command, even from the grave. The rage that erupted in me was volcanic. So he could dismiss my love as childish obsession. He could reject me, humiliate me, leave me bleeding with words sharper than knives. But when it came to my father, when it came to duty, he would bend, twist, and sacrifice himself into oblivion. Not for me. Never for me. Always for Richard Beaumont. I slammed the invitation onto the desk. My hands were shaking. My chest hurt, like something was trying to claw its way out of me. How dare he? How dare he choose duty over me? How dare he pretend that this was loyalty, when it was nothing but cowardice dressed in obedience? Didn't he see? Didn't he feel? Or had I truly been invisible all along? I don't remember deciding. One moment, I was standing there, fury burning through my veins. The next, I was packing. Suitcases pulled from closets, clothes thrown in without care, passports sliding into my pocket. There was no hesitation, no pause to think it through. Thought had nothing to do with it. This was instinct. This was obsession. This was love, if you can call it that. Lucian Vale was marrying Genevieve Aldridge. And I would not let it happen. The flight to London was booked within the hour. First class, direct. Money wasn't an obstacle. Not when every penny of mine was still tied to him. In a way, he was paying for my return. Fitting, wasn't it? As I zipped my final bag, my reflection caught in the mirror. I didn't look like the boy he'd rejected anymore. My jaw sharper, my frame leaner, my eyes harder. 2 years had carved me into something colder, something hungrier. And if Lucian still thought of me as a child, if he still believed I didn't know what I wanted, he was about to learn. Because I hadn't left him. I never could. And this time, I wasn't coming back to beg. I was coming back to take. When I stepped into the cab for JFK, the invitation sat folded in my jacket pocket. I could feel it like a brand against my chest, heavy with betrayal, humming with promise. Lucian Vale was mine. He just didn't know it yet. And by the time I set foot in London again, he would. London greeted me like an old wound. Familiar, sharp, impossible to ignore. The moment I stepped out of Heathrow's sliding doors, the damp air hit me, heavy with the scent of rain and smoke. The skyline rose in the distance, cold steel and glass puncturing a grey sky. I had told myself I hated this city when I left. But standing there now, heart pounding, I realized the truth. I hadn't hated London. I had hated leaving Lucian behind in it. And now I was back. The car that came for me wasn't mine, of course. It was Lucian's. A black sedan, polished until it gleamed, with a driver who bowed his head too low when he saw me. He opened the door like I was still the heir I had once been, though I knew what I really was now. The ghost of Richard Beaumont's spoiled son, returned to haunt what he'd lost. I slid inside. The leather was too soft, the silence too loud. As the car pulled away, my chest tightened with every passing street. Familiar corners blurred past. The cafe I once snuck cigarettes behind, the bookstore my mother used to take me to, the gates of Beaumont Tower glittering like iron teeth. And then there it was, the Vale estate. Lucian's house now, though I remembered when it was smaller, simpler, just a London townhouse. He had expanded it over the years, brick and glass fused into something sharp and commanding. Like him. My pulse thrummed. Every muscle in me burned with anticipation, fear, hunger. 2 years had built this moment into something unbearable. I was finally going to see him again. Lucian Vale. My obsession. My ruin. He met me in the foyer. Time had only made him sharper, more devastating. His suit fit his frame like it had been poured onto him. All clean lines and quiet authority. His hair was darker, his jaw more set, his shoulders broader. But his eyes, those storm grey eyes, they hadn't changed. They met mine the way they always had. Steady. Careful. Guarded. My heart broke and healed in the same beat. Arkansas, his voice was smooth, formal, as though he were greeting a business associate, not the boy who once confessed his love at 19. You've grown. I laughed, bitter. 2 years will do that. His gaze lingered on me a moment too long, flicking over the cut of my jaw, the way my shoulders filled my coat now. Something unreadable passed through his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. Then, like always, the walls slammed back into place. You must be tired from your flight. A room has been prepared. A room. Not welcome home. Not I missed you. The words cut, but I swallowed the blood. Lead the way, then. I met her that evening. Genevieve Aldridge. She swept into the dining room like she owned it. Every inch of her was perfection. Golden hair pinned into a flawless knot, diamond earrings catching the chandelier light, lips painted the kind of red that left stains on crystal. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. So you're Ark, she said, voice silk wrapped around glass. I've heard so much. I smirked. I wish I could say the same. Lucian shot me a look, warning, sharp. Genevieve only laughed, tilting her head like she'd found a new toy to examine. Through dinner, I watched them. Watched the way she touched his arm in public, the way he smiled politely, the way her gaze darted, again and again, toward her phone when she thought no one noticed. But I noticed. I noticed everything. The truth came at the gala. It was supposed to be a celebration, another one of those endless society gatherings, where champagne flowed like water and smiles were masks no one ever took off. I hated them. The polished chandeliers, the rehearsed laughter, the smell of money clinging to every dress and cufflink. But I went because Lucian went. I would go anywhere he was, even if it meant standing in a room full of people pretending not to look at me, like I was a fallen prince crawling back into their world. Genevieve was perfect, as always. Draped in silk the color of moonlight, diamonds glittering at her throat. She clung to Lucian's arm like a jewel she thought she owned, laughing at every word he said as though her entire being was choreographed for an audience. I could barely breathe watching it. Halfway through the evening, the room felt too tight, the laughter too sharp. I slipped out into the garden for air. The night was cool, moonlight spilling across marble statues and trimmed hedges. For a moment, I closed my eyes and pretended I was alone. That was when I heard it. A laugh, low, sharp, intimate. I turned the corner, and there she was. Genevieve, pressed close against a man in the shadows, her hand fisted in his lapel as his mouth brushed her ear. He whispered something I couldn't catch, but her answering smile said enough. It wasn't Lucian who put that glow in her eyes. I froze, fury burning up my throat. My hands shook, not from shock, but from rage. Rage that she could betray him so openly, that Lucian would chain himself to her in the name of duty, while she sold her loyalty to another man under the moonlight. She didn't love him. She never would. But I always had. And if Lucian wouldn't see it, I would make him. The fury hit me like a drug. I stormed back inside, past the crowd, past the chandeliers, straight toward Lucian. We need to talk, I said too loud. He didn't argue. He guided me into a side library, closed the door, and for the first time that night the noise fell away. It was just us. She's cheating, I spat. Out there, in your garden. With him. She doesn't love you, Lucian. She's using you. He didn't even flinch. His gaze stayed on mine, grey and unreadable. Then softly, I know. The words knocked the air out of me. You what? I know, he repeated. Then why? My voice cracked. Why are you still with her? Do you resent me that much that you'd force yourself into a lifetime of unhappiness just to push me away? He inhaled sharply, as though I'd struck him. His hands curled at his sides, but his voice stayed controlled. You think I do this to spite you? What else am I supposed to think? I demanded. You pay my tuition, you send your driver, you keep me in your orbit, but you never let me close. Now you're marrying her, my father's choice, for what? Duty? Appearances? Just so you can say you fulfilled your promise and be rid of me. He stepped closer. His voice dropped, low and rough now. You think me cold, Arkansas duty-bound. Heartless even. You think I live without feeling. But there are things you don't understand. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices. Life is not a bed of roses. Not all of us were born with privilege and safety. We survive on loyalty, on trust. Your father entrusted you to me, his only child. If I betray that trust, what will people say? What would they do to everything he built? Do you think they'd see nuance? Do you think they wouldn't tear us apart? He swallowed hard, and for a moment the mask slipped. It's bad enough, the thoughts I have, the feelings I bury. But to act on them? It would destroy more than me. It would destroy you. It will never work. For the first time, he looked like a man bleeding from the inside. And for the first time, I saw that his sacrifice wasn't indifference. It was love, twisted into something unlivable. It had been a week since Lucian bared his heart to me in the library. A week since he admitted what I already felt burning between us. Yet despite the knowledge that he wanted me, wanted us, just as much as I did, the wedding plans with Genevieve still marched on like an executioner's drumbeat. Each morning, the staff whispered about floral arrangements and menus, as though love could be scripted on parchment and served on silver trays. Each night, I lay awake in a house that felt both like a sanctuary and a cage, knowing his heart beat for me, but his hand was promised to another. I couldn't stand it anymore. Lucian found me in his office later that evening, tall and rigid as ever, but with something softer in his eyes. I closed the door behind me and stepped toward him. My heart was pounding, not just with desire, but with resolve. I've thought about what you said, I said quietly. About duty, loyalty, trust. I get it, Lucian. I know your silence comes from respect for my father's memory. But love doesn't destroy trust. It preserves it. And maybe it should be kept hidden until we're ready. Until we can own it without fear. He shook his head, tense. Ark, you don't understand. This is not a decision we can make lightly. I promised him, your father. You're an adult now, I said, stepping closer. We both are. And we can decide for ourselves. You owe him respect, but not at the cost of your own life. Not at the cost of us. His breath caught. His eyes dropped to mine. And then something broke between us. A wall neither of us had dared touch before. Lucian closed the distance. His hand was firm against my cheek, pulling me close until my breath hitched. You make it sound too easy. I smiled softly, leaning into him. Maybe it is, if you let it be. His lips met mine with a force that made me forget everything else. Duty, trust, fear. All of it fell away in that moment. His hands threaded into my hair, my hands tracing the lines of his shoulders. It was our first real intimacy, not just desire, but surrender. When we broke apart, he was breathing heavier than me. Ark, if we do this, there's no turning back. I know, I whispered. But I want you to try. For us. The next morning, Lucian summoned Genevieve to his study. He asked her to cancel the engagement. She refused. Genevieve was calm, rehearsed. Lucian, you can't, she began. I can, Lucian interrupted firmly. I'm ending this engagement. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. Why? Because you can't stand me? Because you found someone else? She stepped closer. If you break this off, I will tell everyone. Her smile was a blade when she hissed. If you walk away, I'll make sure the world thinks you've been having an affair with that boy since he was under your roof. Let's see how that ruins you. I'll destroy you, Lucian. And she did. Within 24 hours, headlines screamed with poison. Billionaire heir caught grooming his ward. Affair behind closed doors. The estate buzzed with reporters. The scandal spread like wildfire, twisting our story into something sordid. But Lucian didn't flinch. He called a press conference. I stood behind the curtain as he faced the cameras, every word steady and clear. Yes, Ark and I are in a relationship. No, it did not begin while he was under my guardianship. The truth is, I ended my engagement because Genevieve was unfaithful. Gasps rippled through the room as he revealed the photographs, indisputable proof of her betrayal. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted, but all I saw was Lucian, standing unshaken in the storm, claiming me in front of the world. The screen went dark, but the sound of the uproar echoed in my head. The war had only just begun. Time has a way of healing storms into seasons. 3 years had passed since the night Lucian tore down his own walls to stand beside me. I had full access to my trust fund now, though the only wealth I truly cared for was the man beside me. Our love had grown, not the wild fire of stolen moments, but the steady burn of something built to last. On a quiet evening, in the gardens of Vale Estate, Lucian knelt before me. No cameras, no crowds, just us. "Ark," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Will you marry me?" Tears stung my eyes. My answer was simple, steady, absolute. Yes. And for the first time, the future felt entirely, irrevocably ours.